Explosions, vehicles, tactical combat, destruction, choice, and large-scale multiplayer spring to mind when Battlefield is ever mentioned. EA DICE return with a collection of other studios under the lead of co-COD creator Vince Zampella and powered by their long-running Frostbite engine. The team have gone back to the basics with a Battlefield 3/4 meets Bad Company 2 gameplay and tactical destruction system, complete with single-player story missions, pushing PC hardware for high quality and performance via RTX features. Is it as good as it sounds? Let's load up and blow up. Now, it's no secret that Battlefield 2042 was not a success or loved in the technical stakes. Battlefield 6 has obvious inspiration from the 3rd and 4th entries, right from that lens flare splash screen menu, along with a single player game that feels more like COD than modern COD. Destruction, good old fashioned destruction, is front and centre, with no marketing Levolution coin name to be heard. PC has always been the home of Battlefield, and here we get treated to high end visuals and even higher end performance. The Frostbite engine has not evolved much though since Battlefield 1 and 5. This is an evolution of the same engine that powered the 2023 Dead Space remake and 2042 a year earlier. It has lost ray tracing in the years between, but this destruction system has been improved and incorporated into gameplay far more, using a mix of prefixed destructible assets and modular deconstruction. Now, you cannot blow everything up precisely, but you can at least destroy things within a dynamic level of debris, which can drastically change a map, level or route through to the goal. Floors can collapse, building fronts fall off, towers crumble, and even entire dwellings can be reduced to smoke and rubble at the click of a rocket launcher that would make Arnold happy.
Elevated target eliminated!
Visuals are good with lighting quality, shadow cascade, texture detail, and physically based lighting present. Aside the destruction and chaos though, water is still another highlight for the game's technical makeup. With a selection of vehicles, planes, boats and more on offer, the multiplayer brilliance of Battlefield 4 and those immense island levels with storms coming in resonate strong here. The tessellated water bodies react to boats, explosions, and stands up well all these years later. It's not dramatically improved, but like many things on offer here, it's built up from that Frostbite baseline engine that powered Battlefield 4 over 10 years ago now, highlighting how ahead of the time DICE were. The menu is packed with choice and enables you to see most changes in the game as you make them, offering a good range of visual quality levels, scalability and output choices, which include and are greatly enhanced by NVIDIA RTX suite of DLSS super resolution, input latency improvements with reflex, and up to 4x multi frame generation to smooth out refresh rates on high-end screens. The trade-off here is a good balance of fluidity, latency and image quality, with my RTX 5060 benefiting greatly from the technology. Now, before we test the frame times, let's look at the core settings and optimal PC configurations you need to play at its best. The specs of two machines that I'm testing here, the RTX 5080 and the RTX 5060, are very similar. Limited by a PCIe 5.0 or 4.0 connection rate, this means that you have to be aware of those limitations if you break out of those VRAM limits on the 5060. Now, the menu allows you to change lighting, geometry, textures, shadows, reflections and more, and it even includes a balance and performance group setting to aid those that just want to fire and forget, mirroring the console versions most likely. Now, starting with the overkill top end settings on my RTX 5060 8GB GPU at 1080p DLAA, we hover around 66 FPS, which is excellent for the top end settings. However, in play, that 8GB VRAM limit would become a noose around that performance level due to page swapping, again relevant to whether you've got a PCIe 4 or 5 that could also be worse or better. Now, dropping down to Ultra does help us keep within that 8GB limit and offers a healthy 41% performance gain at these same 1080p levels. Now, dropping those textures down from Ultra to High, but keeping everything else at that Ultra setting, offers a small 3% improvement on that. But from my testing, it ensures that we never break out of that 7.5GB limit during single player and multiplayer action. Now high nets us a tiny 3% gain over ultra, with only small reductions on shadow cascade, level of detail and ambient occlusion. Then medium is a much bigger cutback on effects quality, shadow cascade, level of detail and debris and lighting quality, which now starts to become apparent. But a healthy 23% improvement in performance to 120 FPS is your reward, again all at 1080p native DLAA. Now finally, low cuts back lighting, shadows, level of detail very heavily for a further 6.5% gain, but in play this causes lots of obvious pop-in, cascade draw-in, lower quality textures, and is only really recommended for those in need of clawing back every single millisecond. But even on this card we can gain even more and lose very little. Taking that ideal and my optimal settings of ultra plus high textures for 8GB cards, or just ultra across the board if 12GB or higher, enabling DLSS quality now has an almost imperceptible IQ cost, with texture detail and sub-pixel elements being only minorly impacted from the base 1280 by 720p resolution, and it reconstructs that back to the same 1080p output. But that ultra performance cost is reduced even further by almost 19%, bringing us just under 120 FPS target in this shot, which means in play we could cap at 60 or even 90 and remain close or above those levels almost all the time during action. All of these tests and boosts carry over to the higher end cards, such as my RTX 5080, which can mirror all of this at 4K but exceeds that 120 FPS using the ultra preset including textures, with DLSS quality which renders from a reconstructed base of 2560 by 1440, and it looks superb in play and offers the sharpest, smoothest and most responsive version of the game, with weaker cards just scaling down that resolution stack being the best choice using those same optimal settings. With Battlefield though, we always want the game's refresh to align as close to our panel's display, and even on top end cards at 4K 240 FPS plus, it's not easy to achieve without MFG, Multi Frame Generation, which works on all RTX cards up to 2x, but can be bumped up further to 4x on the 50 series range, including my 5060. Taken in the opening mission in side by side, we can cap the frame rate to 240 FPS, which aligns to my panel here, enabling 4x MFG against the exact same 1080p ultra settings plus high textures. Bar a few drop frames on occasion, we can take that same game up from an average of 78 FPS to over 235 on average, which would be even higher if you have the screen to support it or allow frame tearing. Now, frame generation does introduce additional input latency within that rendering chain, due to the game needing to render at least one frame ahead of the current display and then generate the interpolated frames between them. For that maximum 4x mode, every 3 frames are AI generated, with the 4th being rendered by the Frostbite engine. Now this of course adds delay to your inputs appearing as actions on screen, which I tested here in like-for-like missions in one of the higher refresh sections I could find during mission 3 Aqua Landing. Now here at 1080p DLSS quality on the RTX 5060, we are around 117 FPS on average here, with a median input latency of 25.4 milliseconds within the engine itself. It's slightly higher to the screen of choice. Now this is very fast and responsive as needed, but enabling MFG 4X here, we now offer around 400 FPS in this exact same section and hardware, exceeding my Asus 360Hz panel display, but appearing much smoother for the boost this offers. However, the cost here is smaller than you may think for those 3 AI frames in between the 2 engine rendered ones. Now we have a median input engine latency of 39.2 milliseconds, around 15 to 16 milliseconds longer than the 120 FPS rate we had without it. Now on a mouse and keyboard, this is small enough to go largely unnoticed, although some may pick up on the drop. It certainly is smaller than the perceived smoothness of the game output, aligning closer to the panel's refresh, which reduces ghosting and judder as it never drops below the mid 300s here. Now, the artifacts from these generated frames are obvious when you look for them, specifically in the side-by-side slowed down 240 FPS footage. Silhouetting around objects, disocclusion blocking, light flicker, ghosting, and pixel blending is easy to highlight, causing fine details such as debris, fences, and explosions and particles and more in motion to blend into each other, reducing those fine details. Plus, the per object motion blur is now significantly reduced and or off at times due to the extra artifacting that would create and the much faster frame shutter speed the game now has due to that increased refresh rate now aligning to the output panel of choice using those AI generated frames in combination with the engine rendered ones. But in play at 300 plus FPS, these issues are much harder to notice, and a trade-off alongside the increased input latency for achieving ultra-fast refresh rates even on lower-end cards such as this 5060. Now, these issues become smaller on the bigger cards as you achieve 500 plus at higher resolutions, and at those rates you are only seeing these 3 AI frames for less than 6 milliseconds at 4K resolution outputs, which even for the most eagle-eyed players is a very small price to pay. Closing out performance, my RTX 5080 has much wider choice of playtypes and settings. 120, 144 FPS at ultra settings, 4K DLSS balance with no multi-frame generation, averages around 123 FPS over the first level. Or you could turn on 4x MFG and target 360 plus displays at that same settings. Or 1440p DLSS, 240 FPS and higher. Again, no AI frames and a faster and more responsive game. It means the bigger cards just allow you to scale settings and compromise less. But all PC players should be comfortably satisfied with the results with a 60 FPS target as a baseline. Now, some niggles do arise though, with clear areas to fix and improve. Single player is the most affected. Being a completely different XE launched from within the core multiplayer menu, it is slow and cumbersome to go between and even replay missions, taking minutes to quit, load the main menu, choose the map, then quit again and reload the single player. The menu does not appear to track memory use correctly, and the game sometimes uses more memory than needed, or is even actually being reported within Windows, along with it having some odd frame time issues when reloading a checkpoint on occasion, appearing VRAM bound when it shouldn't be. Now, I had a couple of crashes, a mission failed to load on an interaction icon, even with the restart checkpoint, which forced me to load the entire mission again, only for the game's render to fail, leaving a black screen but sound, forcing a third restart. Movie cinematics do crop up, with the image quality being reasonably low and capped at 30 FPS, which is very odd for a DICE game. Plus, my play here was pre and post launch, and the servers were often full on launch day and just beyond, and even the campaign and training levels are locked into those online servers, which seems pointless and frustrating rather than a good way to pass the time waiting in the queue. These modes should really be accessible without requiring a login and hopefully something to patch. Visually it looks very good, but there are occasions of light leak on faces, floors and other occlusion issues can hamper the visual quality a little, as can weaker NPC characters and very poor AI, both from teammates and enemies, making the single player a little mixed due to the issues they create while standing around being shot. That said, they have done very well to resolve much of the delays in terms of getting online after the first day, and there's great numbers in those lobbies, which is always a good thing. Battlefield 6 certainly feels much more like Battlefield of old. The high refresh rates on PC across all specs is most welcome. The return to large-scale destruction, tighter 64-player maps, and a focus on good visual quality and high performance is the right choice. The RTX features offer an excellent choice to play at the best quality and frame rates, even on medium-level PC hardware, and it can scale very well up the PC stack, with almost every PC being able to achieve 60 FPS and even 120 FPS using the game options and RTX features. It can sometimes become CPU bound, even on my 5800X 3D, but this game will largely be GPU bound on most rigs, so long as you set the resolution accordingly. However, the visual quality, technical stack, and improvements over older Battlefield 4, 1, 5 are not a standout feature. And it can be a reduction in places, such as the low tree quality, low polygon count NPCs with poor animation at times and detail. Animation warping can happen during the real-time cinematics, loss of ray tracing which can exacerbate light leakage and lower lighting overall and reflections than prior games. Popping, even at the top end settings, and shadow cascade and flicker can be obvious during play, specifically in the campaign mode but also in some of the wide open multiplayer maps. But the technical features and focus on destruction and chaotic combat feel like coming home, and even though I had hoped to see more feature-rich enhancements in the engine, the performance and scalability of the game and the engine itself mean the team made the right choice and balance for the audience.
Speaking my language.
That's it for all things Battlefield, PC and input latency related. Remember, if you like what we do here on IGN Performance Reviews, then keep it IGN, and we'll catch you on the next one.